Good evening, and welcome to Night Gallery.
Thank you, Rod. And I want to welcome everyone to Midnight Viewing, where once a month we talk all about your follow-up to The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling's Night Gallery.
They say it's Rod Serling's Night Gallery, and it isn't really Rod Serling's Night Gallery, it's somebody else's.
Oh, we know. We talk about it a lot. Your curators at Midnight Viewing are the projection booth's Mike White.
What can happen to human beings when trust is wiped out by suspicion?
And CultureCast's Chris Stashew.
Small boy encased in a crystal ball.
And I'm Father Malone.
The kind of thing that usually infests nightmares.
Join us monthly at Midnight Viewing, the Night Gallery podcast at weirdingwaymedia.com.
Doesn't remotely belong to me. I have no proprietary interest in that at all.
Weirding Way Media. Vanity and pride are different things, though the words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates more to our opinions of ourselves, vanity to what we would have others think of us. Jane Austen said that about vanity. Ambrose Bierce put it another way, a little more succinctly. They say that hens do cackle loudest when there is nothing vital in the eggs they have laid. Oh yeah, it's Noise Junkies, baby! And we are talking Vanity here today. Speaking of which, I'm Father Malone, and you are listening to the greatest musical podcast on this network. But I don't do it alone, oh no. We've got co-hosts aplenty. That means two, straight from Mondo realm. Wouldn't you know it, Heather Drain.
Good evening. I like to think that we're the Pips to your Gladys tonight.
Oh, I appreciate a good pip now and again.
I think we're the pippiest.
And
Orange Pips.
He is my true self. He makes all my podcasts sparkle with his musical ingenuity. Best taxi podcast of all time on any network. Night, Mr. Walter's own HP.
I can't possibly live up to that introduction. Thank you very much, Father Malone.
You can't now because you just undercut yourself. Come on, man.
There you go. Thank you. Good to be here.
Hey, you're the shit. I wouldn't do this with two mamma jammas that aren't worth my time and fiddle faddle. Come on.
A fiddle faddle.
Fiddle faddle. Isn't that a tasty snack with corn and caramel?
Corn is the devil's vegetable. Everybody knows this.
We're going to have a little bit of a segment here, a little show and tell. I'm going to ask each of you, what have you been listening to this week? Could be an album, an artist, or a song, anything particularly on your mind. Go, HP.
Hey, so this week, what I'm listening to is the Fragments Time Out of Mind Sessions album by the one and only Bob Dylan. Time Out of Mind, I like Bob Dylan, but I admit to being a casual listener. And I didn't really hop on to the sort of Time Out of Mind train when it came out back in 97. Oh, by the way, this is the album. It's the latest in his bootleg series. I think it's been happening for like the better part of 20 years, but this is the latest installment. Anyway, I wasn't so familiar with this album. The only thing I knew about it was, I think it was that the Grammys that year was the year that he was performing the song Lovesick. And that guy who called himself Soy Bomb came out. You remember Soy Bomb?
I love Soy Bomb.
It was great. And I actually, in listening to this, I revisited. I at the time, I loved his version of Lovesick that he did on that Grammys performance. And it's still on YouTube. You can check it out. But I didn't know much about the album beyond the fact that he did it with Daniel Lanois, who was very, very popular at the time. He did, obviously, the U2 albums and a bunch of other stuff. So that's what I'm delving into is the making of and the history behind Time Out of Mind. Good stuff.
Delicious and delightful, Heather. Speaking of.
Well, I don't know about delicious, but I like to think my picks are delightful. But yes, to me, it's been sort of a two-way combo between Dick Valentine has a new solo album called This Is Hell. And for those not familiar, Dick Valentine's probably best known for being the singer of the Electric Six. And this album it sparks, it's fun. To quote a wise man, it kicks ass. It's tremendous fun. And on the flip of that, I've been listening to a lot of just different tracks from The Call, with Michael Bean, who's just become like, the more like learning about him, what an art hero. Michael Bean is the vocalist, bassist, and songwriter for The Call, and just tremendous talent. And unfortunately, like, if you guys have seen Lost Boys, and everybody knows that Tim Capello, I still believe that is The Call.
Oh, yeah.
Originally. That was The Call originally, and The Call's version, and the Tim Capello thing's fine with the Lost Boys, and he seems like a nice man. But when you actually hear Michael Bean sing it, that power, like that man had such a voice and such heart. I highly recommend everybody check out The Call. Their most popular album, Modern Romance, is not on CD, which is ridiculous. They really I think they're ripe for rediscovery. Also, he was in Last Temptation of Christ, and was good friends with Harry Dean Stanton. So the man's legit when the Stanton gives his thumbs of approval.
So you're saying Michael Biehn? That's not the actor.
Not
from,
the actor. No,
Terminator
no.
and Aliens. Okay,
No,
I keep hearing that in my head. Yeah.
No, I love that Michael Bean too. No, Michael Bean, Been. Their best, like, their singles probably to check out would be the walls come down, I Still Believe, Everywhere I Look. But just check out their stuff. They're really good. And Peter Gabriel was a fan of his too. So, got the talent backing up. But yeah, him and Dick Valentine. Yeah. It's my duality.
Your version of I Still Believe is gorgeous.
It's so good. Like,
I'd only known the Tim Capello version, which I was a fan of. That's because it's a great song. It's
a great song, and it's faithful. I mean, the version of the movie is faithful.
Yeah, but like it lacks what The Call brings to it, which is an urgency and a passion that is there's no whiff of cheese in the Call's version of the song, whereas the Tim Capello version is like lathered in Velveeta.
The Tim Capello version is straight up mozzarella sticks from TGI Fridays. Like, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it is what it is. So, awesome analogy. And speaking of awesome, what have you been listening to? What's been tickling your ear holes? I hate that. I'm sorry.
Are either of you familiar with a Norwegian rock god by the name of Ida Maria? It looks like Ida. Apparently, she pronounces it Ida Maria. She hit the scene back in 2008 with an absolutely fucking killer debut called Fortress Around My Heart. There were a couple of singles that had a little bit of airplay off of it. The most famous one is I Like You So Much Better When You're Naked. That kind of got some airtime. And then she has a song called Oh My God, which to me, it's a song about like falling in love, and it's just her shrieking "Oh my God" like over and over. Anyway, check that album out. She followed it up with a very similar, like, awesome album that was Katla, I believe. And then the next album, which is 2016, she put out. It was like slow and deliberate and steeped in American spirituals, which was fine, but not all that electric. But evidently she put an album out like 2 years ago, in 2022, an EP, just 5 songs called Dirty Money, and it is fucking righteous. I highly encourage everyone to go check out Ida Maria. It looks like Ida Maria. Guys, we are talking about vanity projects, not vanity like attached to your bathroom. Although if you look up vanity projects, man, you'll find lots of DIY stuff on how to re-caulk your vanity and retile your backsplash. We're talking about music vanity projects. I asked you guys both a question off air, and basically, what constitutes a vanity project? I'm going to read what I wrote to you guys, which is, I tend to err on the side of it originating with the one who's putting it out. If it's Bruce Willis putting out The Return of Bruno, I want to know that's because Bruce Willis had been harboring this desire to put out an album in this character singing these songs, right? And then he got some fame, and then he made that happen. That's definitely a vanity project. But it gets a little murkier with some of the more camp and cult versions or examples rather of vanity projects. Like the big one for me is William Shatner and his entire oeuvre. But in those cases, I wonder, did it start with Shatner? Or did somebody have an album worth of material and thought, if I get William Shatner to record this, then I can sell this many copies? And is that a consideration? Does that even matter?
I'll give my definition, but to speak to the Shatner thing, I don't have any direct evidence to back this up, but my assumption is based on we're talking about the transformed man, primarily here, because that was really what put him on the map as a kooky kind of crazy vanity filled kind of thing. I can't imagine that wasn't something that he came up with on his own, because it's such an oddball mix of theatrical monologues with kind of music, popular music of the day, like Mr. Tambourine Man, but a soliloquy from Cyrano de Bergerac. That, in my mind, knowing what I know about Shatner and observing him over the course of my lifetime, I can't imagine that didn't spring from his wacky Canadian brain that, okay, I'm going to make this artistic statement that's a mix of, popular music and theatrical ambition, and it's going to blow people's minds. That's my impression anyway. Heather, do you have any thoughts on that, on Shatner in particular, before we talk about our definitions?
I mean, Shatner is such a bon vivant Mars in a lot of ways. Like, he is, I could 100% seeing it actually being him. This is the same man that learned Esperanto and became fluent in Esperanto and was in the movie Incubus, which is a really underrated movie. I know a lot of people just probably view it as a novelty, but it's actually really good and has some gorgeous cinematography. And plus, I mean, Shatner speaking Esperanto, I mean, and the selections on that album, I think, also speak to just how bonkers, because even by then, I mean, we're already starting to see like people that were better known as actors doing music, and I mean, and even going into genres they're not associated with. I mean, like, I know off record we had talked about the Golden Throats compilation from Rhino, which is classic, and we will get into that later. But I mean, Mae West doing Twist and Shout and stuff like that. But Shatner is so like earnest, and that's what sort of makes it stand out. I mean, I love Telly Savalas, but nobody really talks about Telly Savalas's album, and he did do an album. Like, Telly Savalas did a musical album, so did Chad Everett. I mean, the guy that played was it Sebastian Cabot did an album. All kinds of weird actors took this foray in this era, the 60s and 70s. Shatner stands out because it's so bizarre and it's so sort of like heartfelt. Like, this is the guy you will not forget at the open mic night, 100%.
But the word that you used, which I think is really the key to his whole thing, is earnest. Like, I never get the sense that it's a put on, like some of those songs off of Golden Throats. And just as some background, that's something that I picked up, whenever it was, I guess was high school. And it was kind of ground zero for this idea of sort of kitsch or camp, musical covers and what have you. And a lot of the stuff on that album is just, frankly, a lot of it's kind of unlistenable from a purely musical perspective. But I think the difference is when you're talking about a Sebastian Cabot or a Tony Randall or Mae West, like, my impression is that's something that they had external influences, perhaps saying like, you should really cover, this song, or you should really try to get more of a youthful audience by doing this. Even someone like Leonard Nimoy, who had his own forays into sort of singing, but Shatner is just so off the wall, like you said, Heather, but yet so honest in its sort of objectives. I mean, you can tell this wasn't something that he did just as a goof or a campy thing. He really believed in this. When you hear him, he's giving it his all as an actor and as a performer.
So we'll just consider Shatner a lodestone, a North Star, if you will, film of vanity projects. But my question remains, does it matter if you are approached? Can you cry, "That's not my fault, I was just a hired hand"? Like, is that escape clause available to these people, or does it even matter? Like, Do you define a vanity project as it originated with them, or it has no bearing? It's the product we're judging.
So my definition of a vanity project is a little bit, and honestly, kind of for some of the reasons you guys have touched upon, particularly UHP, is, you know, to some degrees, you're going to have shades of sort of subjectiveness because it's creative. Anything creative is going to be subjective. I mean, for me, I was thinking of the vanity projects where it ends up really becoming the vanity aspect is the biggest, I think, or maybe when people tend to sort of outreach their limits a little bit, and not in an interesting sort of like, I'm going to challenge myself creative ways, but sort of like when hubris, it's almost like this sort of like hubris takes control. I mean, like if I was going to say like a musician going into film world, perfect example would maybe be like when Madonna was, then her and Guy Ritchie remade Lena Wertmüller Swept Away. And it's like, you know, Madonna, I mean, it's easy to hate on her as an actress, but I mean, there are films that where she was fine in. I mean, she's not, nobody's ever going to mistake her for, you know, I think a master thespian, but you know, there are certainly worse out there. But I mean, yeah, remaking Lena Wertmüller definitely outstepping one's boundaries. And, so maybe that is maybe when you're just sort of, you know, or Bruce Willis trying to do a Motown album, even if it is a character, like that's a reach. That's a reach. Don Johnson, Don Johnson making music with people that actually are really talented, ranging from Dweezil Zappa to Paul Schaefer. But I mean, but Paul Schaefer's talented. No, and I mean, and he plus he played Artie Fucking and Spinal Tap. So I can't really. That to me, that's when the vanity, you know, because honestly, when it's good, I don't think you think of it as a vanity project. That's why I mean, and for also for the reasons you mentioned too, Father Malone. Like, yeah, Purple Rain's not a vanity project, but also, you know, I don't even think is Under the Cherry Moon is a vanity project personally, but I realize that's because I like it. And I think it's actually a really good movie. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think people are a little too hard on it, you know?
But I think the thing that we're going to explore here a little bit down the road is a vanity project doesn't have to be bad to be considered I mean, I have several examples here, and we'll get into them of vanity projects that I think work really well. I mean, we're going to put Shatner aside because that's as Father Malone said, that's kind of like the lodestone for all of this. But I don't equate, for me, I don't equate a vanity project with something like bad and negative right off the bat. You know, because I think we're conditioned to thinking of, like, you know, like I said, a hubris. Like that was another great way of describing this. Somebody's hubris outstripping their, you know, natural talent or their ability to excel in a creative venture. So I like I said, I'm reluctant to label a vanity project as bad on the face of it.
Okay, but do we peel? It's a good question. Do we peel the vanity label off of it if it's good? Do we not even think it's a vanity project anymore?
I don't think so. Just because, like I said, it's from, again, my personal definition that I cooked up just for the show is that it could be coming from a place of ego or maybe dissatisfaction with their current sort of lot in life, as far as, you know, they're creative, maybe they're stagnant creatively and they need something to kind of jumpstart that. So they strike out in a totally different way or a totally different, you know, milieu. And some cases it might be successful. In a lot of cases, probably more often than not, it's not. And I think it's easy, but I think it's easy to point the finger and say, well, you know, you shouldn't have, you know, put yourself out there so much. Well, you know, sometimes people can do that, artists can do that, and you get something, you know, perhaps, you know, better than you expected, or even downright magical in some cases. In some cases, you're really glad that they decided to, you know, put themselves out there and try something new.
Right. No one's ever going to call Gorillaz a vanity project, right? Because it's fucking massively successful artistically and financially. But horrible failure, would we be thinking, oh, Damon Albarn's little vanity project there, Gorillas? Remember that thing?
But I think that's a wonderful example, Father Malone, because it and you'll see this reflected in some of my topics of discussion here, is that I could see that. I didn't think of it, but that's a good example. That is something Damon Albarn kind of had this idea in his head with this artist and said, I'm gonna, it's a totally wacky idea to have this sort of virtual band that he's kind of writing songs through, and it's a very ambitious idea, but God damn it, he pulled it off for several albums, and he brought in some wonderful guest artists. I mean, but I do at the core of it, I do think it's Vanity. I think it's him saying, I can do this, and I'm going to put this out there.
I think we're gonna dive headlong into all of the varying vanity projects that are out there, both laughable and laudable. But I do want to start positive. I want to get into some of those laudable ones. Mine was Gorillas. There you go.
Oh, look at that segue.
Great
Come
example.
on.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's the best one I could think of after HP's, which I already have pre-knowledge of. Yeah, I think that's a worthy example. I think, as you said, HP, this him and his flatmate, Jamie Hewlett, who is a fucking genius, by the way, Tank Girl, for God's sake. If I were to ever get another artist a tattoo of their artwork, it would be Jamie Hewlett. Anyway, that very well could have been all vanity, like just a fuckaroo where he's got a bunch of cartoon characters stepping in for his band, and he's not going to actually like promote it as himself all that much. He's just going to put it out. And if you recognize the voice, you do it. If you don't, well, whatever. But turned out that first Gorillaz album is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's a perfect album as far as I'm concerned. A couple of them approach it, but nothing like that one. Jesus H. Christ.
She made me kill myself. Come on. Come on.
So anyway, that's my example of a positive one. Heather, what's yours? Because I know what HP's is, but I'm curious what your favorite vanity project out there. One that should be raised above, maybe peel the label off a little bit.
100%. The first one that came to my mind. Oddly enough, is for an actor who I haven't really seen a ton of his work. Actually, very little of it, even though he's probably one of the biggest stars on the planet right now. But Ryan Gosling's band, Dead Man's Bones, is phenomenal, and they've only done like one LP, but I really, 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 really recommend seeking it out, especially if you're someone who's into very sort of macabre music. If you love like soundtracks to old horror movies, if you like things that are kind of on the gothic, there's a Silver Lake, I think it has the Silver Lake Conservatory Kids Choir on it, so you have that sort of eerie children's choir thing, which is so cool. It's tremendous. It's just him and like one of his best friends. It's just like the two of them making this incredible music that I think is beautiful and eerie. I listen to it all year round. It's really, a lot of people tend to kind of, I think it's showing up more and more in like people's sort of like Halloween lists for understandable reasons. But of course, if you're like me, you can listen to all manners of the macabre year round.
Runs in our blood.
What?
It runs in our blood.
It does. We're monster kids. And so I think I love it. I love his vocals on it. I think it's so cool that he did it, because this is obviously, when you're doing that kind of thing, you're clearly not trying to get on the charts or, amplify your fame level by any means, which I think is probably, why we could peel the label off a little bit. Because, he's even on the album art, you kind of have to look for him, look for his face. It's there, but it's not all about him. But I think it's a great record. Honestly, I will always have love in my heart for Ryan Gosling for this album, and specifically because of this album.
Wow, high praise indeed. I'm definitely going to check this out.
It's so good.
HP, hit us with the old school.
All right. So this was one of the when we were sort of tasked with this assignment and think of some good and not so good vanity projects. This was one of the first ones that I thought of as far as a successful Vanity project, and that is the Blues Brothers. Not the Blues Brothers 2000, because I think by then it was just sort of sad, but the original idea. There's the original Blues Brothers, the sort of band that grew out of that famous Bees sketch where they were performing I'm a King Bee. Uh, this to me, well, obviously it's successful because the Blues Brothers kind of became a household name. They had, the amazing John Landis movie that is, pretty much unimpeachable. But where I think it's actually very, very successful, it may be tricky. Like if you were to try to make a Blues Brothers today and have basically two, white guys who are kind of performing the blues, unironically perhaps, it may be a tougher sell. But I think for me, the reason why I think it's extra successful is for two reasons. One, they were smart enough to pack the Blues Brothers band with incredible musical heavyweights like a lot of guys who came out of Stax, Steve Cropper, Donald Duck Dunn, iconic on bass, Blue Lou Marini on saxophone.
My cousin Bones Malone.
That's right. And that to me already gave it a lot of authenticity. Instead of like if they had just populated the Blues Brothers band with a bunch of anonymous sort of like session musicians, it wouldn't have that grit.
She complicated.
The big reason why I think it's so successful is, if nothing else, it shone a light on artists at the time who at the time weren't at a very popular point in their careers. Folks like James Brown, John Lee Hooker, even Aretha Franklin, who maybe that wasn't, the height of her career or any of their careers for that matter. They shone a light on all of their music. They appeared in the movies. And if they can put the word out there that, hey, there's these amazing blues and R&B artists that maybe you ought to check out, that's a win in my book. And the music was great. Obviously, Dan Aykroyd had a passion for the blues, and he brought that to this. And he kind of brought in, I think John Belushi was kind of like an omnivore where whatever he was interested in at that time, he dove in with both feet. He started kind of, with the blues, and then he ended up getting more into a punk thing later. But to me, like I said, the band was fantastic, and the music was great, and it gave, notoriety to a lot of really deserving artists at a very vulnerable point in their careers. That's why I think it's successful.
Should.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to top. Like it 100% is a vanity project. These two guys, they've got a club that they go to after they're working on Saturday Night Live. They're getting up on stage and dicking around and playing as rock stars or bluesmen or whatever. They force that onto TV because they get so famous that they can kind of get this sketch. They force it on as a sketch first, and then they start appearing as musical guests as if they're an actual band. This is 100% vanity project, and yet it all worked. It was great.
There's very, very little that you can say about it beyond the fact that, like I said, Blues Brothers 2000 is its own thing. But like as a concept and as a musical force at the time, I mean, they were so successful with it. They could basically, because they were so famous and so popular, like you said, Father Malone, they could kind of, they could force that on the viewing public by featuring them on their very popular show. The rest is history. They performed at the Hollywood Bowl. They had several platinum albums. It's incredible.
And they were on a mission.
Good stuff.
God. You know why? Because as you mentioned, that was definitely this lily white kid from the suburbs' first introduction to James Brown and John Lee fucking Hooker and Aretha Franklin, and just it goes on and on and on in that movie. Sam and Dave, for God's sake, it's not even on the.
Oh, it's great.
It's just playing on the car radio, and I'm like, what is that thing they're listening to? So they did good work. Those brothers blues.
Yep. They had respect for the music, and it really showed.
Are there any other examples of a good vanity project we'd like to mention? Because I'm I definitely want to get into the really terrible ones out there.
I have several, but and there's one that I'm dying I'm dying to mention this because I actually think this one, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say I'm going to call this one an anti-vanity project. Is that possible? Where it's actually somebody who tried to almost do the opposite of a vanity project. He kind of, so in the example I'm gonna give, and this may not be totally germane here, but I just thought it was a great twist on our discussion, is the band Tin Machine. Okay.
Oh, I love Tin Machine. Yes.
Right. So at the time, David Bowie was coming off a series of very, he had Let's Dance. This was an area that he was never entirely comfortable being like the super mainstream popular singer. He had just come off of the last album that he had done at that point was Never Let Me Down, which wasn't really a successful album. He was kind of eager to make music that got away
off of
Loving the Alien was off of Tonight. That was a couple of that was after Let's Dance, but before Never Let Me Down and Glass Spider and all that stuff.
Right.
The Glass Spider tour.
It's just more. It's like an attempt at an extension of Let's Dance, don't you think? And like a law of diminishing returns in that regard.
I completely agree, Father Malone. It's I like some tracks off of, and this is a side discussion, but I love the song Loving the Alien and the song Blue Jean and a few other songs I like off that album. But you're right, it was the law of diminishing returns. And this was what was leading David Bowie down this path of dissatisfaction with how his career was going. And it kind of, like I said, culminated after the Glass Spider tour. He basically was eager to make music that got away from the mainstream and kind of, reinvigorate his interest in making music again, because he was getting to the point where he just wanted to hang it up and just be an artist or something. So the reason I call this an anti-vanity project is because he insisted, because the temptation is very, strong that this was going to be a Bowie project, right? Bowie is like the biggest name. I mean, no one's going to be clamoring to know what Hunt Sales, son of Soupy Sales, his involvement in the band is, or Reeves Gabrels. But Bowie was insistent that the rest of the band, they weren't sidemen. They were all equals in this band. Any interview that was done, they all had equal shares in discussing the projects and writing the songs and everything. So what Bowie did, which I think is very interesting here, is he really kind of like, took, he subsumed his own like ego and his own sort of because he could have very easily just said, this is my next project, this is a David Bowie project, but he said, no, this is Tin Machine, this is a different thing. It was a very much a back to basics affair, the tour. It wasn't a theatrical extravaganza like he had been sort of accustomed to doing. The debut album is great. I enjoy it. I don't think it's his best work, but I respect what he was trying to do, which is get away from the polished mainstream. It almost kind of presaged grunge a little bit in a way, because a lot of it is very strident. The music is aggressive, sometimes lacking in melody, but this is where his head was at. He wanted to, like I said, bury himself into a band that he wasn't the main focus. So to me, that's why it's almost the opposite. It's kind of a vanity project, but in a way it's anti-vanity, because he did his best not to be sort of the main focus of the band.
Those other band members must have been so stoked to be in a band with David Bowie where he refused to give interviews or promote the band in any way.
No, it's funny with that period of David Bowie's career, and is that Tin Machine to me is almost sort of like the preamble or the intro to the resurrection that we're going to get when he reconnects with Eno and we get Outside. We really get his next renaissance, which is really, because the 80s I think was a little bit of a dodgy period. I mean, this is somebody who is a diehard David Bowie fan, as I think a lot of us are. What's interesting is with Loving the Alien, I always felt like he was kind of channeling Brian Ferry a little bit, especially if you see it in the video. Because even like the mannerisms, because yeah, spoiler, I'm also a diehard Roxy Music fan. And what's interesting is with Tin Machine, of course, they covered I believe If There Was Something, which is off the first Roxy album. I'm a little rusty on my Tin Machine. I do remember that album. Well, they did too. The first one being really good. I don't think I heard the second one, but they covered a Roxy song.
It was okay.
Yeah.
I don't, to be honest, I have to go back. The cover I remember off the first one was they did a cover of Working Class Hero by John Lennon, which was my, like at the time, that was my hook into the album because I was such a John Lennon fan at that time. And I thought it was a good cover. Probably the best, I would say the best thing that Tin Machine, well, not really Tin Machine, but the thing that was the preamble to Tin Machine, which you may or may not know, was he did a cover of his own song, Look Back in Anger.
Oh God, I love that song.
With it's a great song, but the remake he did with Reeves Gabrels on guitar and Erdal Kazilke on drums and bass is killer. It's like, I love that original song, and the remake is better.
Oh God,
and that was what led him into Tin Machine.
I'll have to check.
It's fantastic. It's a bonus track off of, if you get the Lodger album, the Ryko disc version, it's a bonus track off.
Well,
of
see,
that.
I have the Lodger, but I don't have the Ryko disc, so I'll have to seek that out. Also, with Hunt and Sales, they actually are on a lot of Iggy's solo albums. From I'm trying to think the period.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, they've been on a lot of stuff, but and I'm trying to remember which Iggy. I almost want to say it's like the Soldier era, like the late 70s, early 80s, but admittedly I could be wrong on that. But the dudes have credibility for sure. I forgot they were in Tin Machine, which is why it's so cool doing the shows. Like we can get like all of our little synapses, refired up on some of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, weirdly enough, like Moon Age Daydream, that boy documentary, there's like no mention of Tin Machine or Iggy.
Speaking of Iggy, I mentioned Ida Maria at the top of the show. That song I mentioned, Oh My God, she had recorded it as a single in 2007, but when she recorded the album, the backing vocals are by Mr. Iggy Pop.
Oh, and by the way, I wrote that down. I'm gonna be checking that out anyways. But now that I have even more impetus, like, but yeah, I mean, David Bowie, like, and he's another one that like crossed over to movies, but it never felt like a vanity project because it just felt like an extension of just his creative, just sort of Sturm and Drang. It's like, oh, of course he's working with Nicholas Roeg.
He's just an artist.
Of course.
If he suddenly came out with a line of sculptures, we would have been like, oh, cool, Bowie's doing sculpture now. Like nothing felt vain with David Bowie.
I know, it's just, you're just happy to have it, you're just like, and some things are better than others, but I mean, it's David Bowie. It's like, oh, it's got that sparkle dust on it, we're good, give us more, please.
Hey, I'm gonna mention a good no, it's not. Listen, it's not a good vanity project, but before we get to the darker ones, in my research to find the nuggets of juicy morsels of terrible vanity projects, I looked into Mr. Steven Seagal, actor, thespian extraordinaire.
That I have that on my list. That's one of my one of the ones. Okay, go ahead. That was a late addition to mine too.
He's a lawman these days, so I'm a little trepidatious to slag him off. But no, here's
that's so funny.
So he's got two albums. One is sort of just adult contemporary nonsense he's got a close up of him with a guitar, and it's some crystal cave or something like that. We're not talking about that one. We're talking about the blues album here, right? So he put on an album of blues, and I was like, this is going to be a fucking hoot. And then I started listening to it, and the music was really fucking solid. And I looked at the artists, and they're all fucking super skilled fucking bluesmen, blues women. And Steven Seagal has a pretty passable singing voice. So no matter how much I wanted to hate on that blues album, it's just a pretty good blues album. I couldn't say anything against it. And then I'm like, okay, well, the Crystal Cave one, this is going to be like sharpening my knives. I'm rubbing my hands. I'm tenting my fingers. And it's the same. It's like, it's, that music ain't for me anyway, this sort of adult contemporary bullshit. So I can't say that that's bad, and he can sing. So
So I am so impressed that because I had the same reaction, Father Malone. Like I'm like, oh, because I listened to it's called Songs from the Crystal Cave. It came out in 2008, and it was never released in America. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be so bad. And the worst thing I can say about it is it's like you said, it's adult contemporary. There's nothing like it's capably produced. He doesn't have a terrible singing voice. He actually plays guitar rather well because he plays all over the album. There's a song on that album featuring a harmonica solo by Stevie Wonder, which I'm like, why the hell would, if it's that bad in musical circles, how the hell could Stevie Wonder deign to put his stamp on it? So yeah, I share that opinion, Father Malone. I think it's not my cup of tea, but I couldn't hate on it for being like tuneless.
Wait.
I guess.
Okay, no, hold up a minute. Okay, Songs from the Crystal Cave has a song called Strut, where Steven Seagal does a Jamaican patois.
He does
with Lady Song.
It's regrettable.
Oh no,
it's regrettable.
It is more. Yeah. It is more than regrettable because the sad thing is the woman with him, Lady Song, is actually like this very respected musician in that like genre, and that song is filthy, and it makes me think of Steven Seagal wanting to rub his little sweaty nads on some poor woman makeup, which is disgusting. But it also makes me laugh, so I'm kind of torn because it does entertain me. But I feel kind of gross about it. It's kind of like I don't know, it's like seeing an old teacher at a strip club and and it's just weird but funny, but you're kind of grossed out. And or if you're back in the video rental days, like, hey, my old pastor's in here renting like like some porno with women that are like, that's all pregnancy themed. I don't know. My brain goes to dark places, but I respect the insight you guys are throwing for the skull, and his amazing widow's peak of love. So thank you both.
He's not above the law. He is
the law.
I have marked him for death, but this album's okay. Now's the time. What time is it? It's time to get ill. Let's talk Beasties for a second, okay? Because I'd like to start, if y'all don't mind, in the drag category. Now, I'd like to take you all the way back to the early 1990s. Fly girls and flannel as far as the eye could see. Okay, so now hip hop, which had always been overshadowed by its sort of emergent at the same time big brother of punk rock, has finally kind of gone everywhere. It's infiltrated everything, right? It's no longer a fad. It's not a flash in the pan. It's serious and it's here to stay, right? And it's been around long enough now that we get the new school, a whole new generation of rappers have sort of come up with BDP and Big Daddy Kane and De La Soul and NWA and on and on and on and on. White people had not figured it out yet, except for the Beastie Boys, but they are just the exception to every musical genre. They were going to fit in no matter what they did. So they technically don't count and are in a category by themselves. But there was Third Base. Much love to Third Base.
Oh, love Third Base.
They don't get the gas face.
No, the gas. The gas face. My heart just grew like 3 times its own size with the gas face mention.
We HP and I have a deep love for Third Base. Prime Minister Pete Nice is my particular favorite, but of course
he's my favorite too. Yeah.
Oh, is he? Okay, all right, good.
Oh yeah,
because Search is fun, but like he's not as lyrically as skilled as Prime Minister Pete Nice was. Wow, I feel so old having this conversation right now.
I think the word is seasoned.
So the other day, I was just watching a video featuring MC Search. He tells this story. I don't know if you ever heard the story about how MC Hammer took out a hit on him on Third Base.
Of course I've watched that. I'm going to watch everything with MC. He's a raconteur, man. I can watch him.
He's very good at telling the story. Yeah, he's very good.
Yeah.
In the White Rapper show is, of course, a classic.
we're going down a third base rabbit hole. No, we're talking about the early 90s right here. And they are the actual exception to the white rapper rule, because the only other one, the real face of it at the time, was Vanilla Ice, who does get the gas face. But one man sought to change it all. He had the cred and he had the skills. That's with a Z. But most of all, he had the rhymes. Ready for him? I got some.
So you wick whack, knick-knack, tic-tac, get back. I got the funky style, and you know you can't get with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's David Faustino. He's out.
Holy shit.
Oh,
no.
yeah, he's out there dropping mad science. That's Bud Bundy from Married with Children in his band Ballistics, and his 1992, that's his single. I told ya, it doesn't get any better than what you just heard. And what you just heard is fucking horrible.
Whoa. I'm floored. I am flummoxed and floored and in awe of that cut. That I'm bowing down to it. Like, holy shit. That's the one nobody talks about.
I mean, with good reason, I guess. But and I think it should, in the way that Golden Throats sort of was crystallizing our thoughts about crooners and just these sort of vanity projects in general in the early 90s when that came out. Like, I'm sure there's a version of that with people from the 90s on that we can eventually get into. But evidently, okay, so Faustino gets on Married with Children when he's like 17. By the time he's 19, he's got a club called Ballistics that he's running, and it's a hip hop club, to his credit. And I'm sure the club featured tons of actual really good hip hop artists and got them noticed, and he did good in that way. But he also, for some motherfucking reason, thought he could rhyme. And not only is his delivery fucking terrible, but his lyrics, you heard it, I'm playing it again.
Wick whack, knick-knack, tic-tac, get back. I got the funky style, and you know you can't get with that.
Oy, ay, ay, oy, ay, ay. There, that.
Yeah, that was, I mean, when Vanilla Ice's flow is sounded tight.
Yeah, say what you want about Rob Van Winkle, but he could fucking spit, right?
All right. Well, and he's got the attitude. This is what I was talking about earlier, where people outstep their limits in a way that isn't, you don't feel like they're like pushing themselves creatively, but it's more just like the hubris. This is hubris. This is little Faustino thinking he could be up there. And oh my God. Like, wow. I feel like people doing rap badly is one of the most cringe. It's almost like bad stand-up comedy, where it makes you kind of die a little on the inside for some reason, especially white people. Like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. It's like, oh, like you better be like third base if you're going to do this, A
decade before that album came out, that song, that clip that I played you, on Saturday Night Live, Jim Belushi, future Blues Brothers, 2000, does count. Anyway, he did a sketch on Saturday Night Live with Alex Karras, and this is a clip of that. Check this out.
We're white guys, and we take no crap when we deliver our white rep.
In 1982, Jim Belushi was saying, hey, white people, don't do this. 10 years later, Faustino fulfills that prophecy.
First thing that I thought of, and I don't know that this can lay claim to predate that David Faustino rap, but the first thing I thought of when you played that was Brian Austin Green on Beverly Hills 90210 doing Fushnickens raps at the beach club.
Now you're a bum and your family's living tripe. I don't want that to happen. That's the reason why I'm rapping.
So you may have a precursor to Faustino kind of busting a rhyme. I think David Silver he might be the first sort of exponent of that type of cringe rap.
Right. That was the producers of a television show in the narrative of their shows making him do that. This is David Faustino going, the world needs to hear this. I'm going to put on record. I'm going to press them. I'm going to get me some of them new CD things, and I'm going to sell them. And I'll have another career. I won't need Peggy and Al and that dog, whatever the fuck its name was anymore.
I always loved it when the dog would have a VO. That was always, sorry. I love Married with Children, but Okay, I was gonna ask you guys though, as far as like cringe levels, what do you think is more cringy though, Faustino or Rappin' Rodney? Does anybody remember that
Of
shit?
course, I remember that. Yeah, I think
That was rough.
Faustino is 100% because that wasn't. Look, it was called Rappin' Rodney, but he didn't rap. I mean, he just basically did his stand up while a chorus of women kind of rapped behind him or sang behind him. It's not my idea of like a hit single or anything. I'm not going to listen to it for fun, but Faustino, because that, to circle back to the original idea of Vanity, like that's not Rodney Dangerfield doing something out of vanity. That's him doing I'm sure that's some like his manager saying like, hey, the hippity hop is pretty out of sight now. Let's do something to get
Oh
the kids.
God.
Whereas
I
Faustino's is purely like, hey, I can do this. I'm cool. I can rap. So I can't
yeah,
I can't put him in the same category, unfortunately.
well no, I'm not saying one's vanity. I'm not talking about vanity levels. I'm just talking about cringe
Oh,
levels.
Faustino, 100% for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I don't think Rapid Rodney's funny. And I love
Right.
Rodney
It's
Dangerfield.
a
For the record.
failure, but it's a novelty record. You know, it's like
Yeah.
I agree with you. It's not a vanity thing. We're not judging it on that. But I don't think his intent with it was as a joke, and just because it failed, it failed. But like David Faustino's serious, man.
But that somehow is funnier though than failed comedy.
NWA, like I was in LA at this time, and actually it was by then it was Ice Cube. Cube was everywhere and everything at the time. Could you imagine putting like Dre put out The Chronic, and this kid put out
Oh God.
he's like running a club that like is featuring prominent hip hop artists and new emerging artists, and like where where is that disconnect in his brain that he thought, yeah, that mine is as valid as them, and
Let me ask you this though. Let me ask you this. Like, what is more authentic? Faustino doing whatever he's doing, or Snow doing Informer, this Canadian white rapper who's affected a patois, rapping about like being a informer, drug dealer guy. Like, I think that's equally cringy to me.
was this song The Informer, was it good? What did they have to investigate to figure out that this person was a white guy from Canada?
But he was in prison when that song hit. Like he actually did. Snow had
There
street
you
cred.
go.
I stand
Like,
corrected, but for me, yeah, I could see that, but I also don't think he's from Jamaica. He may have done a lot of bad
I'm all
things,
defending Snow.
but I don't think he can lay claim to like being like a Rastaman who can,
Neither can
No.
Harry Belafonte. He was from fucking Queens.
yeah, but we had family that he would spend time with in the islands in the West Indies. So I give him credit for that. He had lineage that dated back to that style of music.
I think just hearing Brother Malone say "fucking Queens" is like it's my new favorite thing. That was beautiful. I will say this though, you guys awakened a beautiful memory for me of an example of a mid '80s good white rapping that not enough people talk about unless you've seen the movie Tapeheads. But I got to talk about King Cotton's Roscoe and Chicken Waffles advert rap, which is amazing.
It's beautiful. It's a thing of beauty.
Right? I seriously fucking love it.
It's
so
great.
much.
I had the videotape. I had a pirated videotape of Tapeheads, which I think they would have appreciated. Mike Nesmith would have appreciated. And
100%.
from that, I recorded the audio of his Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles rap to like put on mixtapes.
That is amazing. Oh my God. Because you know why? Because waffles just pancakes with little squares on them.
Come on, fly girls, and wiggle down their bottoms.
Waffles just pancakes with little squares on them.
Do you guys ever feel a little bad though, like punching at some of these artists though? Because like I do think he's no.
Not at all.
Fair.
Look, like, yeah, I appreciate the earnestness and A for effort, but get the fuck out of here with this nonsense. This is something that you play for your friends, and that's where.
Do you guys think Brian Austin Green ever referred to himself as the notorious BAG?
Suddenly proud of myself Heather, in that I have not considered Brian Austin Green for like 25 years.
I'm so jealous. Apparently, me and HP, he's been living rent free in our minds.
Projects.
Try and top Faustino. It's a Faustino bargain.
Oh, I can top Faustino in 3 notes. My one of my bad, I have several bad, but one of my bad is a recent discovery. It is you know him, you love him from such films as Goodfellas. You loved him in Home Alone. This is Joe Pesci with his 1998 album, Vincent LaGuardia Gambini Sings Just for You.
Dare you?
Did you guys pick this? Is this on your list?
No, this is, you have no idea.
Now,
man.
Heather and I both Heather and I on occasion drop onto Chris Dashu's podcast, The Culture Cast. And Pesci is a frequent topic of
likewise.
And this particular period of his artistic endeavors comes up frequently.
Ah, okay. Well,
I was not ready. Oh my God, I'm so glad you didn't tell me, HP. I'm so glad. The surprise. Oh,
in fact,
so
when I told Stasha we were doing this topic, he said, "Oh, you're going to do the Pesci album?" I'm like, I'm sure. I thought I had honestly thought you were going to bring it up.
Only as a good one. I mean, how much comedy legit have we mined alone from the, you see, for everybody listening and for Harris, Chris, and I don't think this original instant made it on any episode. I think we were just bullshitting after we got recorded. And I think it was the Dragnet episode that was the origin.
Yes, it definitely.
And Chris was like, "Oh, I got some shit for your guys' ass," and plays this Joe Pesci track from this album you just mentioned. And which he says, I can't remember the actual lyric is, but it sounds like he's opening the song saying,
"Eat my ass."
Eat out my ass.
Yeah.
And he sounds like it's a threat. Like he's like, that's an insult. And the way he does it and the way Chris would then do it, like Chris Dashu's Joe Pesci.
It's very guttural and frightening.
Hey, beat out my ass. Treat all my bras like trash. You'll catch a blast if you move too fast.
HP, tell me you have stats on this album, because
so information is unfortunately a little bit hard to come by on this. I do know it came out in '98. I know I listened to it, so you don't have to, and that's a warning. I'm not recommending you do it, because as bad as the journey down some of these vanity projects has been, like this was probably the worst, because there's nothing. I mean, I guess the redeeming feature is that like he's very foul-mouthed and he's clearly having fun with what he's doing, but that fun doesn't extend to the listener. He has, maybe the song you're referencing is the song "Take Your Love and Shove It." It could be the song "I've Got News for You." He also has a song called "Yo Cousin Vinny," which he, for some reason, he does it in English and he does it in Spanish and he does it in, so there's 3 songs in English, Italian, and Spanish. He does a song called "White Wise Guy," which, I kid you not, all he did was take the backing from the Blondie classic "Rapture" and he raps his own song over it. It's it's terrible. It's just it's terrible. I will not be listening to it again for any reason other than a podcast or something I have to do. It's bad. I think it was kind of like, you get the sense that he thinks he's being funny and it's this big giant joke, but no one's laughing except for Joe Pesci. Let's be honest. And
that's bullshit. I'm laughing right now.
Well, but we have a little bit of ironic distance from it at this point. I don't know who the audience was in 1998 for this. You know, maybe, I don't know. Maybe if you can make the case that it's a comedy album, but it's terrible.
The same people who bought the California Raisins album.
California, wow, that is great. So,
the 80s were so terrible.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
They were terrible. Nobody ever want to go back to the 80s. Trust us. We survived it. And we literally had the California raisins were a thing that existed.
Visually and on audio. Oh, what a nightmare those were. Those little step and fidget raisins. My God. That's Bob Goldthwait's phrasing for them. From back
I
in-
love it. Love Bobcat.
Heather, hit us with a terrible Vanity project, please.
I feel like you guys have taken me on such an emotional roller coaster. The good, the bad, the ugly, the eat out my ass portion of the show. Oh boy, howdy. My contribution is not even an album specifically. It's it's a category, and it's this horrible thing that's trending right now as a phrase. Nepo kids, meaning, you know, people that are basically have careers specifically because of nepotism and nothing else. So it's not like, say, you know, okay, well, Miley Cyrus has famous parents, but she has talent in other areas, so she doesn't really count. And at this point, she's more famous than her parents. So same thing with Ricky Nelson, the great late Ricky Nelson. Like, he actually surpassed that and made some great music. Chet Hanks, the son of Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson, not so much. I feel so bad for those parents and Colin Hanks, because, you know, they're looking at this D-bag entitled bugaboo of a child. Like, you know, that's like the ass baby. Even good parents are going to have that one kid. If you have enough kids, that one kid's going to let you down and make you question. They're like, well, Colin, why didn't he turn out like Colin? Colin's not a douchebag. Colin's not appropriating African-American culture and having women twerking and breaking bottles on the pavement. And I hate that I even know who this motherfucker is. I resent it. I have brain space that could be going for something that will better my life, and instead I know who Chet Hanks is.
It's one time, then it's over with. Bitch, we outside lit like we supposed to get. If she slid in my DM, I'm supposed to hit. Bitch so thick, how are those supposed to fit?
And I resent that. At least David Faustino was in Married with Children and was really funny in it. At least Joe Pesci's one of our greatest actors. Joe Pesci is a gem, and that album makes me laugh my ass off. I'm sorry, Harris. Is it good? No, I'm not going to say it's good. Does it make me laugh? You better believe it. And Chris Dashy doing it's even funnier, for the record. But the Nepo babies, this is bullshit. I'm sorry. You should be proud to have pride in a talent that you have earned. Ricky Nelson, when he bucked his parents, Ozzie Nelson didn't make that kind of music. He wasn't into the rock and roll. Ricky Nelson, you know, followed his path and now, to this day we know his music. His sons, Nelson, not so much, but you know what? They followed their passion, and they are, I guess, talented. They're more talented than Chet Hanks, that's for sure. And it's not even just like, oh, I'm gonna dog on the rap guy. No, rap is viable music, and like anything else, when it's done right, it's powerful. And but when fucking Chet Hanks, I hate this. To quote Joe Pesci, eat out my ass. Since we're recording in honor of Chris Dashu, because we all love Chris, and all of us have been on the Culture Cast together. I feel like Chris will give me a hard time if I don't mention 2 Vanity albums, because we're both pro wrestling fans. Now, I don't personally. I feel like there's some merits to both of these albums. Faint merits, but I wouldn't call them like the worst, but questionable for sure. Because Macho Man Randy Savage did a rap album, which is
brilliant.
Be a man.
But I love Macho Man, and hearing his voice, especially when he says like baby girl, like, and he says he's trying to be romantic, but he's like baby girl. I love it. And he has a whole diss track on Hogan, which is, come on, that's wonderful. And then of course Hogan had the album, and I'm trying to remember what was that called, but I know but the merits on that is Jimmy Hart, basically helped write and produce it. And Jimmy Hart's a legit musician.
He was a very good songwriter. Yeah. He was all over those wrestling albums, like the ones with like Mean Gene and all of that. Yeah, the wrestling album, I think.
I love that wrestling album. I played
I
the
just,
fuck out of it.
oh my God. Well, and I mean, the,
A true American? Oh yeah.
well, and you get Roddy Piper singing, which makes my heart, Roddy Piper's my number one
Oh, for
forever and
dude,
always. So yeah.
I was so proud of my Scottish heritage. Okay, listen, my name's Malone, but I'm Scottish. Because of Roddy Piper.
I feel like you were about to go into a rap with that.
Oh, you don't want to hear me rap. I'm at least wiser than David Faustino.
But in his defense, you said he was like 17 when he did that.
No, he was 19 when he did that.
Oh, but still, like, I'm so
No.
glad.
No pass for Faustino. No.
Oh, okay.
We all did stupid shit when we were 19, but none of us
Yeah.
made a record label, put a fucking album out, and pretended to be on par with fucking Dr. Dre. I've got another bad album, ladies and gentlemen.
Mhm.
Scarlett Johansson put out an album that's a cover of Tom Waits records.
Oh God, I forgot about that. I think it's because I kind of blocked it out.
Mhm.
Yeah, like if I was molested by a satanic group, it's in that sort of cortex of the brain.
First of all, who is this for? Is it
Scarlett Johansson.
for Tom Waits fans? I am a Tom Waits fan. It's not for me.
I love Tom Waits.
Because he's a fucking god. But Scarlett Johansson's Anywhere I Lay My Head album cover of Tom Waits songs, which, by the way, her interpretations of are like, it sounds like air. It's like, it's music for a fucking Sofia Coppola movie. It's
Ew.
all, it's Tom Waits covers, which I don't know. Maybe it's a good idea, but the execution is not good at all. And she's not. I was expecting. She's got a deep voice, Scarlett Johansson. So I was expecting some gravel because that's what I love about Tom. That's right. We're on a first name basis, me and Waits. But she kind of goes for a lilt, and I don't know. It's puzzling. It's puzzling. It's not necessarily bad. I think if I just heard the songs, I wouldn't be offended. But like, as a Waits fan, I'm offended. And just as a, what the fuck were you thinking, fan? I guess I'm pro in that case. But yeah, that's a bad album. That's a vanity project, y'all.
100%. I mean, points for her for having good taste. I can give her that. I'm not necessarily a huge ScarJo hater. I always still felt like with the Ghost World cast that, I mean, the real talent and that was Thora Birch.
Oh
And
yeah,
I feel
you're
like,
right about that.
yeah, I feel like we live in.
I love Scarlett Johansson. Don't get me wrong. I think she's fucking phenomenally talented. Just maybe don't record other people's music. They did it already. You don't have to.
Right. I will say though, as far as like actresses doing music, she's far less offensive than Gwyneth Paltrow.
Right on. Remember when Gwyneth Paltrow figured out she can carry a tune? We were all supposed to fucking fall all over ourselves. Like suddenly she's a fucking genius. As if every actress in the 1930s couldn't sing as good or better than Gwyneth Paltrow. And then she started showing up on people's like shit. Remember when was CeeLo Green had that hit, that Fuck You tune?
Yeah.
Right. And then she like showed up on some show and like performed a duet with him. And then like every time he showed up to perform the song, she was there performing it, it seemed. Holy God, what a nightmare that was. Gwyneth Paltrow, we get it. You can carry a fucking tune. Nobody cares.
She's like a yeast infection, like you just can't get rid of her. It's like you eat all the probiotics, you eat your Greek yogurt, you don't wear super tight pants, you try not to take too many antibiotics, and yet there she is, Gwyneth Paltrow with her vagina candles and her bland ass acting and she's just like, God, she's awful. Like she offends me with how bland she is. So yeah, I would be, Scarlett Johansson's way better. But yeah, I mean, nobody, if you're going to cover Tom Waits, you better be on close to the level of a Tom Waits. You better be that cool,
HP, what are you very quiet over there?
No, this was when we brought up this idea of vanity projects. This was the first thing that came to my mind, and I know that Heather also thought of this. This is a bit of a complex legacy. The one I'm thinking of is Chris Gaines. It's called Chris Gaines' Greatest Hits. It was
God bless
Garth Brooks's.
So excited for
it was his ill-advised attempt he had an idea for a feature film. It was going to be called The Lamb, and it was going to be about this sort of doomed, rocker named Chris Gaines, and it was going to be played by Garth Brooks. And it started by he produced a behind the music on VH1, but it was a mockumentary. It was basically him as Chris Gaines and all of the supporting players and talking about what a great legacy the guy had and blah 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 blah. But anyway, the thing of it is, it was not successful, and no one could really understand what he was trying to do. His fans were confused. The album itself was received with confusion, and it received mixed reviews. I think he performed as Chris Gaines on SNL the same week that he was the musical guest and the host.
Remember what he played?
The thing of it is, I went back and listened to it again.
Do you remember what he played?
Say that again.
Do you remember what he played?
What
On SNL, what the song?
What do you mean as far as the character?
Yeah. What did Chris Gaines? What were his song choices on?
His
chance.
I don't
to get to America. What this twisted, dark rocker was going to be. I remember.
No one will dispute that he was a talented, country singer, songwriter. The man is a good performer. He's got a great voice. So the project had that going for it. And in fact, what people forget about the album was it did have a legitimate top 40 single come off of it called Lost in You. It hit the Billboard Hot 100, top 40. And it's a good song. And again, in this adult contemporary vein, it's very, very good. If this was produced by anyone else, there was no sort of disguise of a character you're performing behind. This was a relatively moderate hit, and it's performed well. It's a good song in that vein. So much like our discussion about Segal, in this case, I can't fault it on its musical merits or lack thereof, because he was a good singer songwriter. It's not like the guy couldn't sing and perform and write music. But the issue here is the pure hubris involved in just deciding, well, I'm going to take on this character and I'm going to produce this opus about this guy that is totally, outside of my comfort zone. And, and maybe in different hands or in a different time and place, it might have been accepted a little bit more readily, but it was wrong place, wrong time, wrong project for Garth Brooks. And it's hard to imagine this not being the biggest sort of stain on a relatively storied country career.
It seemed to me that we were getting advertised Trent Reznor, and what we got was Michael Bolton.
That's fair. Look, I can't defend the man on his choice of
like it was supposed to be like a dark rockin' guy, right?
Yeah, I don't remember the ins. I know the part of it was, well, he wasn't here's the thing. It wasn't supposed to be, there was no, this guy wasn't the second coming of Al Jurgensen. That wasn't the character. It was more, if I remember, this was more in the vein of a moody kind of rocker. Maybe he had some nail polish on, he colored his nails, but it was more in a kind of, for lack of a better word, he was like a sensitive kind of rock star. But it was never going to be Trent Reznor or, like I said, Uncle Al or anything like that. The album doesn't support that thesis because it's mostly, mid-tempo rockers, some nods to R&B. But I, again, like musically, if this came from anybody else, or if he just said, I'm Garth Brooks and I'm producing an album of, I'm going to take a left turn here and produce an album of R&B adult contemporary music, it would have been fine. but to mask it behind this sort of character that just confused people and was, you know, maybe Pete Townsend levels of delusion about what the project is going to encompass, that's where things got tripped up. But musically, it's fine. I mean, it's, you know, I can't fault him on that score.
I have a friend who posited a theory to me about actress Anna Faris, who I adore. Anna Faris is always comedically naked. Right? It's always a flash of her butt or something, or like side boob or something. And his attitude is she just wants to be naked on screen, but can't commit to it. So she makes it as a joke. So do you think this was Garth Brooks was like, I'm kind of tired of country. I'd like to do this other thing, but I can't just do it. I got to have it wrapped up in this burrito of Trent Reznor and movie deals and wasting everyone's time on SNL, in which otherwise was a very funny episode. He was very funny in it.
Now, I mean, back then that was his lane. He was the country guy. He was probably the biggest country star around at that time. So, you know, the prospect of, and maybe this was something, I don't know what the history is behind the scenes. It could have been, maybe he did say, I want to do this, but management is like, no, you can't alienate your audience. This was perhaps a way that he could have his cake and eat it too. Much, not making a direct comparison, but look, you know, Stephen King had you know, he took another name. Was it Richard Bachman? He put out books as Richard Bachman. Why? Let me ask you, Father Malone, being a big Stephen King fan, why would Stephen King put out books under an assumed name?
Well, initially it was because they didn't want to flood the market. He had already had too many books out, and he had the luxury, because of that situation, to judge his works and think like, well, I'm not that totally proud of this. You know, he would have eventually put them out anyway, and he did, obviously. But I think that was the initial impetus. I think that probably came from the publisher more than him, if I'm remembering correctly. And I might not be, because my Stephen King knowledge, although it spans nearly 50 fucking years, it ain't as sharp as it used to be, because 50 years.
Yeah, well, and it's a lot. I mean, there's a lot. It's very prolific. I think probably, I don't know what you guys think. I think the behind the music probably hurt it the most in some ways, because if you watch it, and it's, I mean, it's comedy gold. It is like, because they are playing it deathly serious. And the fact
it's very, very, that's the thing. There's no, it's very, very dour, because that was the character, and it's played very seriously, but they don't really have the chops, any of them, to pull this off. And the self-seriousness of that, I mean, I think people were already sharpening their knives when they saw the album cover, and he's wearing the guy liner, and he's got like a soul patch and a full head of hair, when the guy in reality had. Okay, it was laughable, and it was never going to come off after that. But I guess my theory is, maybe in a different time with the more accepting, you know, public, perhaps he could have just said, look, this is where my head is at right now. I'm going to put this out. It's not country, but see what you think. But somehow the wires got crossed, and he felt like he had to make a grander statement. And I'm not really sure why.
Well, the thing about the behind the music that I was going to get to, that to me, the clincher is the whole premise that they have an actor, a younger actor that looks kind of like an Eddie Vedder cast off, playing the OG Chris Gaines. And the whole thing is he gets in a quote unquote disfiguringly,
an accident,
a disfiguringly bad one, where he has to have plastic surgery. And then he comes out looking like Garth Brooks, which on one hand, I'm like, is Garth Brooks have some esteem issues? Like, it's not, you know, I mean, Garth Brooks isn't, I mean,
maybe he's a very upgrade.
Okay. Like,
he was he described himself as a thumb in a cowboy hat. So
I mean, he's not that bad,
but
there's part of the reason I think he appealed to, he's obviously his talent, but also like, because I remember going to school with little Roper kids, and like their dads, some of their dads could look like Garth Brooks. Like Garth Brooks has like that everyman kind of thing. Like, that's not a bad thing. He's not a bad looking guy, but he's not like a pretty boy. He's not a really handsome. He's not John Saxon. Like, I love John Saxon, sorry. But but It's the whole accident, and plus, I'm sorry, the soul patch is a facial hair that is really hard to get away with. Like there are exceptions, like there are in life, but very few guys, especially in the Garth Brooks age range, are gonna not. It looks like a midlife crisis. It's a cry for help. It's like, I'm still cool, guys. Look, I got soul patch.
It only ever looked good on Elwood and Jake Blues.
There you go. See,
Oh, a big circle. It's a big musical wheel we're on.
It's fascinating though, and I'm glad that Garth Brooks did that. I mean, good for him. It was a misstep. He's fine. I mean, he had a concert in my parts of the world in Northwest Arkansas last year, and there was such a huge turnout that it legit angered me, because trying to navigate this town with that many people in a smaller college town was an ass pain, and also having to see a bunch of like people yeehaw. And Miles Davis, I believe, once said something to the effect that if you see a bunch of white people in a pickup truck going yeehaw, get the fuck out, because something stupid's about to happen. That's a paraphrase, but I think he's right.
I think you got the spirit of the thing.
The spirit, the tenor.
I just want to take a moment to say, like, as much as I'm kicking David Faustino, like, he did put that record out. Like, he did marshal the forces and the creativity and he produced that thing, and like, good for him. And who am I? I'm just some guy, a voice in the wilderness, but it is really fucking bad. It's way worse than Chris.
I mean,
because as you said, HP, it's ultimately just a passable adult contemporary, as the Steven Seagal one was, as the Scarlett Johansson thing is, really, ultimately. But it's all just passable entertainment. I can't get all too angry about it. Hey, remember the grandfather of all of these?
Oh my God, no, I can't listen. I can never hate on this because of Rick James. Party All the Time is a banger. I mean, and it's less of a banger because of Eddie Murphy and more because of Rick James being behind it. But it's Rick James. Rick James is legit, 100%. You don't get much more legit music-wise than Rick James.
I realize my timing is poor because we're discussing the worst of the worst. I should have with good old Eddie Murphy's Party All the Time, because, as you said, it's a really fucking good song. Ultimately, it's a great album, and it is because of Rick James. So those are if Rick James had put that record out, we would all just be listening to a Rick James Party All the Time.
I love him.
It's a good album. It is 100% Vanity, though.
Oh no, and I mean, it got worse. I mean, I think Eddie Murphy.
Everything else.
Well, that Michael Jackson duet he did was really bad. You guys remember that?
What's Up With You? Is that it?
Yeah. That was a choice. Now, I find it's funny because I think I always view the holy trinity of the 80s, like vanity projects, because we got Eddie Murphy, as you mentioned. We mentioned Bruce Willis earlier. Of course, you have Don Johnson with his LP and long form music video for Heartbeat. Which I believe Joan Severance is in that video. Like, it's crazy. Like,
all I remember is Dweezil Zappa had like a neon green guitar.
Yeah, but that's a weird thing, is that Johnson and Murphy got some really great legit musicians to work with them on those albums. I don't know about the Bruce Willis one. I know Motown released it, which I'm going to
be very nice for the current state of affairs. Okay.
I know, but that was originally going to be my pick, but I felt bad. And Bruce Willis is a great actor. Like, there's no hate for Bruce Willis.
But he also put out like a long form video of all of those things it was like an HBO.
Holy shit.
Thing. Some of it is very, very funny. And it's fucking bar music. It's bar band shit, ultimately. You know what I mean? Like, it's out on Motown, but really it's just like, sub Jay Giles band level kind of shit is ultimately. So it's not that offensive. It ain't on a Faustino level. I'm angling, guys, to see which was the worst of the worst, because I still maintain it was Faustino.
I think Chet Hanks.
Yeah, shit, you're right.
Yeah, I think Chet. I mean, because Faustino.
It's happening like now.
I know, but it's bad. It's bad. It's like it's bad. Faustino, though, that deep cut.
This is a musician par excellence, going in waters that he should never have gone into. And I'm talking about Keith Moon, the dearly departed drummer from The Who. He put out a solo album before he died called Two Sides of the Moon.
I guess I should have kept my mouth shut when I start to brag about my calling.
You won't find a bigger fan of Keith Moon era Who than I. I love Keith Moon. I think he's like as brilliant a drummer as you could ever hope for. But having said that, the man was no singer. And it's really a sad, just a sad state of affairs because he just, I don't know, this is a vanity project in the sense that I'm sure he just figured, well, I'm Keith Moon, I'm popular, and this is, maybe I can, earn a few bucks off of this and whatever. And I don't need but it's bad. I mean, it's mostly covers. I think he did In My Life by the Beatles. I think he did some, maybe there's a Lennon cover on there somewhere perhaps, but it's just sad, not good. Actually, I'm looking at it here. I'm looking at the producers. Among the producers, you ready for this, Father Malone? Steve the Colonel Cropper. So once again, it comes 360 degrees all the way back to the Blues Brothers.
All roads lead to Chicago.
Chi-town,
Sweet home
baby.
Chicago. Yeah. I don't have any big write-up on that. I remember getting excited when they reissued it because I never heard it, and I picked it up and I was immediately disappointed because he sounds awful. I don't even know that he's playing drums over the whole CD, so it's bad. Sad, really.
I don't want to end on a sad note though. Can we have a little bit, at least a tiny bit of love for Richard Harris and his musical endeavors? MacArthur
Park.
Oh
yeah.
And they gave us begat the great SCTV sketches with Dave Thomas doing his amazing Richard Harris and doing like the long extended dance mix on Mills Rock Pile.
I love SCTV. I just saw there was a sketch where they were kind of making fun of who was Rick Moranis was doing Carlin because Carlin apparently had gotten sort of lazy in his comedy. Rick Moranis does an amazing anybody, and his Carlin is fantastic. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's and Richard Harris, Ernest. Holy, he should have changed his name to Ernest Harris, because his performance at MacArthur Park and My Boy, which our late friend Richard, I used to torment with, and he would just chuckle and just be like, "Good Lord!" And then I gave the LP to him for his birthday, and so I'm an asshole, I guess. I don't know. It was fun. It was fun. Richard Harris is great, and MacArthur Park's amazing. Donna Summer's version is technically better, but I have love in my heart for the OG.
Well, he was he was always already an accomplished singer. We had him singing Camelot. Let's get out of the negative into the positive. Accentuate the positive, as Dean Martin used to say. Final spin of the record, ladies and gentlemen. HP.
Yes, sir.
Release an album based out of how vain you are, and we all know you are. What would you call that album?
I would call that album Dim Commercial Prospects.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, you just undercut everything I slagged you down for. God damn it.
Sorry.
Reverse. A twist.
You want do you want the musical genre or the actual album title?
Both.
The musical genre would be cabaret sort of gothic murder ballads, and the album would be called Erotic Clown Murder Ballads. I think it'd be funny.
I want to add that to the playlist right now, honestly.
I think it would be fun. I'm not saying it'd be good because I have no, unlike you two gentlemen, especially our beloved HP, who is a wonderful musician. I have no musical acumen, but I love music. I got a lot of heart, to quote Xander Schloss from Straight to Hell, got a lot of heart.
As for me, I went full vein. Father Malone, Blessed in the West.
Oh, shit.
And the music would be a sort of a like a tropicale. That's what I go for. Just sort of a happy beach music with a country western Mexican flavor.
Oh my God, just take my money right now. Just take it, because I want that. And I want your dim commercial prospects too.
Yeah, that's the best title I've ever heard.
That's like a Mothers of Invention album title. I love it.
Yeah, that title cries out for massive.
Yeah, it's sort of setting myself up to fail because you kind of figure there must be an irony to it, and it couldn't. But no, the actual fact is it probably would have very dim commercial prospects. So, what are you gonna do?
All right, then. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us here at Noise Junkies and dipping your toe into the ocean that is ultimate vanity. Heather, tell us what you're up to.
Up on my website, mondoheather.com, I just put out a new article about some of my favorite scenes of the various shades of love in cinema. So please check that out and keep up with me there and on social media and Patreon under @MondoHeather.
Yeehaw, go seek her out. As for you, HP, what are you up to?
I am up to no good. I am the co-host of the Wolf and Raisin, the Banachek podcast with the esteemed colleague to my left, Father Malone. We also co-host the Night Mr. Walters, a Taxi podcast. I do the occasional guest spot on CultureCast with Current Company occasionally. And also, my music appears here and there in the Weirding Way Network. I'm on Astounding Tales of the Public Domain. You can hear me there and elsewhere, including the bumpers on this very network. That's me.
You've already twice listened to the music of HP. He did the bumper and our theme song. As for me, if you want to hear anything, I do go to weirdingwaymedia.com. HP mentioned Astounding Tales of the Public Domain, one of the shows I do. Midnight Viewing, the Night Gallery podcast, that's another one. Hey, Chronicles from the Crypt, that's an old one. That's already done. You can listen to all of it in its entirety. That's about Tales from the Crypt. Everyone loves it, right? Because it was the best. It wasn't. If you listen to our episodes, you'll understand why. And we're huge fans. Anyway, also go to fathermalone.com. That'll link you to all the crazy visual bullshit that I'm up to. Anyway, thank you all for joining us here on Noise Junkies. I don't have a catchphrase. I always stumble at the end here. I'll think of it maybe 4 episodes in.